Early enthusiasts regarded the medium of film or cinema as magic, and the first magical component was editing. To prove this theory, let us review a series of shots which are yet to be edited, and it most often will look like this. These random shots appear without rhyme or reason. But through the magic of editing, the series of shots we just saw magically transforms into this. Editing, therefore, provides the sense and meaning to a series of shots, to a sequence of scenes, and to the final complete film. In the early days of films, mostly short scenes shot continuously or chronologically, editing was not as vital or sophisticated as it is today. With the advent of feature-length films, which can run for more than an hour, editing became a more complicated process.
Editing is the second time you direct your movie. Ang ibig sabihin nun, sa pelikula mo, kahit anong balik-baliktarin mo, kahit anong kuha mo, pero pag inedit mo, dun mo malalaman na ikaw ay isang filmmaker. Actually, before I directed the film, I'm a film editor. Nung ako'y nag-direct, nakita ko na totoo pala yung sinabi ni Ismael Bernal. I also want to quote what Celso Ad Castillo mentioned. Sabi ni Celso Ad Castillo, how can you be considered a filmmaker? You can be a filmmaker once you started editing your film. Sa dahilang sa editing, dun mo malang mabubuo ang pelikula. Dahil from the script, tinunsin mo yung script, sinyut mo ngayon, halo-halo yan parang kalamay yan na nag-shooting ka, pinagsama mo sound, pinakinggan mo sound, mga dialogue, mga acting, lahat na artista. Then, nagre-revise ka pa ng script. So in other words, walang kasiguruhan na yung dinirect mong pelikula ay magiging isang magandang pelikula. Ngayon, malalaman mo lang yon na ikaw ay total filmmaker pag inumpisa mo na i-edit yun.
Editing actually starts during the shooting or principal photography. The director, in executing his shots, is already in the process of editing his film. Others clarify that it is actually pre-editing. When a director decides to include or delete a sequence of the screenplay he is filming, he is in effect already editing his finished product as he conceives it. But the bulk of real editing comes after sequences or scenes have already been photographed, after negatives have been exposed, or after footages have been shot in video. The linear system, also called conventional system, is applicable to films shot in 35mm negatives. When a roll of negatives runs out, it is entrusted to an assistant editor who chooses the footages to be printed, guided by a camera report that segregates the good shots from the not good or NG footages. Usually assembled into reels of 1,000 to 2,000 feet, these negatives are sent back to the laboratory for printing of working rushes or work prints. The assistant editor prepares these rushes or work prints and logs them in the sequence of shots as listed in the clappers shown in each reel of exposed negatives. The original or master negatives is always stored in a clean, cool place where the rushes or work prints undergo the sometimes damaging editing process. Damaged work prints can be replaced by using the original or master negatives for reproduction. The editor begins to break the rushes and splices them in the arrangement he so decides. There are two ways of splicing rushes. These involve the use of a tape splicer or a cement splicer, also called hot splicer. Tape splicers using mylar tapes are mostly used in the editing of the rushes because these tapes can be peeled off if the editor decides to resequence the scenes. Cement splicers are more permanent and are used in the splicing of the original or master negatives for the final cut for printing. The editor usually works with an upright editing machine or moviola or a flatbed editing machine. His other equipment will always include scissors, grease pencils for marking, extra reels, and masking tapes. Through a string-out assembly, the editor segregates the footages he will use. Discarded shots, called outtakes, are labeled and stored away in case there is a need to use them after all, especially when the film director reviews the editor's cut. As to the audio components, dialogues are recorded on quarter-inch tapes during shooting. These are transferred into sprocketed magnetic audio tapes. The rushes for the picture and the dialogues in the magnetic tapes are then synchronized for simultaneous editing of the picture and sound components. A device called the synchronizer or sync block is used to lock the separate picture and sound reels. It sometimes features multiple gangs to hold 2 to 6 rolls in sync at one time. An amplifier can be attached to the gangs so that the dialogues can be monitored. The next editing stage is organizing the segregated good shots into what is called the rough cut. This now involves cutting the shots the assistant editor has spliced in the proper order, one after another. Scrutinizing the shots through the viewer, the editor decides where to start and end a particular shot. He uses a grease pencil to mark the frame where he will make his cut. The rushes are taken out of the viewer. The cuts are made on the marked frames. The remaining footages are spliced together by tape. Sequences are then spliced together in their proper order. The rough cut now becomes the material which the director will review for possible revisions. Let us hear some of our film directors on the working relationship with the editors they usually work with in tandem.
Usually, ang relation ng editor at saka yung director na pinagtatrabahuhan niya, ang unang cut binibigay sa editor. Lalo na when the director is still shooting the movie, para hindi naghihintay na mabuo muna yung pelikula, pwede lang putulin ng editor yung mga sequences na tapos na. Ang ginagawa naman ng director na yan, kung may break sa shooting, nire-review niya ngayon yung mga naputol na, yung na-edit na sequences. At kung may correction, binabanggit pa niya. Pero pinababayaan niya muna yung editor na gamitin yung sarili niyang diskresyon o yung desisyon niya para dun sa first cut ng movie. When the film is finished, the director will demand na makita niya na yung kabuuan ng pelikula. Ngayon, ang director ang pwedeng magbali-baligtad ng mga sequences. Hindi ito pwedeng gawin ng editor ang pusa niya. Dahil yung structure ng pelikula, actually sa director yun eh. At kung may mga desisyon tungkol sa pagtatanggal ng mga sequences na nakunan at naputol na, director pa rin ang susunod. Pero minsan nakikipag-usap siya sa kanyang editor at itatanong kung ano ba ang ano kanyang suggestion o kung ano ang pwedeng gawin para maayos yung pelikula. Yung finish, yung first cut na ginawa ng editor, the director goes to this. Pinag-iisipan niya kung kailangan ng transposition of sequences, kung kailangan ng deletion of sequences, or if there is a need to shoot more sequences, additional sequences, para mas fluid at mas klaro yung pagtakbo, yung progression ng story. Maraming suggestion ang editor na hinihingi rin ng director. From the part of the director, hindi rin maganda yung halos sunod lang ng sunod yung editor na kung ano sabihin ng director, ganun yung puputulin yung ano. Kailangan yung style ng editor, maipasok din niya doon sa kanyang ginagawang proyekto. And the director must not resent yung move of an editor to edit it his own way muna, di ba? Ang pagtatalunan nila, yung pag-uusapan na nila sa diskusyon na matino at makabuluhan, yung pagpunta nila sa final cut ng pelikula.
In preparation for the scoring, the applying of sound effects, and the mixing of the final one, the dialogues of the shots in the rough cut, especially those with bad sound, will be dubbed by the actors and actresses themselves. Dubbing loops are prepared by the assistant editors. Magnetic tapes corresponding to the rushes being dubbed are utilized for dubbing. A dubbing supervisor comes in to oversee the whole dubbing process with the assistance of the assistant editors. After dubbing, the work print is reassembled into the rough cut. With clearer dialogues, the director and the editor can now cut more precisely. Successive cutting refines the preview cut until a polished final cut emerges. Scoring, crowd dubbing, putting in the live and laid-in effects, and finally mixing can now proceed with the final cut as the working guide. The master negatives are retrieved by the assistant editors, who can now work on matching the final cut footages. This is called negative matching. The assistant editors utilize the edge numbers along the side of the film for precise matching, duplicating the editing decisions on the final cut to the exact frame. These numbers can be seen in between uniform numbers of frame. These are called latent edge numbers. The footages from master negatives are spliced by cement splicer or hot splicer. After the negative matching, printing follows, and finally, the first print will come out of the laboratory. Another film has been crafted. Let us hear from some editors, linear or nonlinear, on the advantages and disadvantages of the nonlinear editing system.
Ang editing, ma-conventional, ma-nonlinear. Sa ngayon kasi, ang editing is computerized na. Pero there are local well-known directors and international directors who still insist on doing their editing through conventional. For the simple reason na pag conventional kasi ang ginagamit mo sa pag-i-edit, nafi-feel mo yung bang hawak mo ang pelikula, para bang is in your hand. So once na hinawakan mo ang pelikula, naramdaman mo sa puso mo, nafi-feel mo na ang pelikulang ginawa mo ay ito, feel na feel mo Not unlike non-linear, yung computer is in the click of the mouse lang. So in other words, there is no direct contact. But I'm not discouraging filmmakers not to use non-linear. Kasi kumbaga sa papunta na tayo dyan. But still, let's not forget the conventional type. Because kumbaga sa pag-aaral hindi naman pwedeng grade 6 ka kagad. So kailangan mag-umpisa sa grade 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. Diba? Bago kang mag-graduate.
But one thing is sure to stay. Editing will always be an integral component in filmmaking. It will still provide the magic that pioneer filmmakers once expected it to be.
May mga pelikula na kung minsan magandang script, pag dinirect maganda rin. Pero pag hindi na-edit ang tama, bali wala. So, editing is very much important. It is the last chance na makukorek mo ang mga pelikulang, mga mali mo sa pelikula mo. Yung mga hindi mo dapat kunan, nakunan mo, at yung mga kinunan mo na hindi mo inisip na dapat gamitin, nagagamit mo. Sa madaling salita, editing nandyan ngayon ang buhay ng paggawa ng pelikula. Everything na involved sa art, nagpupunta lahat sa editing yan. Parang painting din yan. Nagpinta ka na nagpinta, so kailangan i-retouch mo yan. So what? I consider it an editing also. Ang definition kasi ng editing is correcting. So you have to correct all the scenes na sinute mo. You will put all the scenes in its proper place para makabuo ka ng isang pelikula na masasabi mong nagawa mo bilang a filmmaker.